order and this meeting be in session, and we can do a roll call, please. Emma.
Director Daniels,
I'm present.
Vice President LeHue,
I'm here.
Director Jaffe,
Here.
Director Christensen,
Here.
and President Lather.
I'm here. So now that we've called the roll, call to order and roll call, we're going to go into closed session. Do
There
we
any-
have a public comment before we go into closed session?
No, there was
No.
none.
Okay, so then we will go into closed session and return at 6:50. And we move to the next item, which is public hearing. We have none. And number 3 is board members' opportunity to remove items from the consent agenda. I guess we could start with Vice President LeHue, if you're there. Do you have anything to remove from the?
I do not.
Okay, and Director Daniels?
I do not either.
Is Director Jaffe there yet? I'm sure he'll be here any moment. How about you, Carla? You have anything to remove? Unmute yourself.
I don't have any items to remove.
Neither do I. I believe we could just move on to the consent agenda.
I will move approval of the consent agenda.
I will second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can you please do the roll call, Emma?
Director Daniels,
Yes, please.
Vice President LeHue,
Yes.
Director Jaffe is absent, Director Christensen,
Yes.
and President Lather.
Yes. So we can move on to oral and written. Did we have any public comment for the consent agenda? I'm sorry.
Only one person.
Okay, so we should.
No public comment on consent.
Okay, but we have oral and written communications.
Right.
So
Correct.
we can move forward with that.
Ms. Bryce, I've unmuted you. Ms. Bryce, can you hear us?
Becca, can you give her the instructions on how to unmute yourself by a phone, in case that may be the issue?
I don't actually know.
Well, she's not muted. I don't
She
think.
isn't muted.
Yeah, it looks like she's participating on a computer as well.
No.
We could try to promote
is it?
her to a panelist.
Chai Bryce. She's under attendees.
Becca, we could try to promote her to a panelist for the 3 minutes and then put her back as an
Sure.
attendee.
It could be that she doesn't have a microphone on her computer, maybe, but yeah, we can do that.
And this is for an item that's not on the agenda.
Yep. We assume.
Ms. Bryce, can you try talking now?
We could go through the directors and see if we have anything to say.
And then come back, yeah.
Yes.
Maybe she can call on the phone and then.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
sorry, I'm muted. My suggestion to Ms. Bryce is to leave the meeting and then call in using the phone number on the agenda, and then we can try and take the public comment that way.
That would be easy.
Okay, so we're going to move on and we will come back to her when she has, oh, good. Thank you for the chat, Chai Bryce. Okay, so we're going to go on to directors. So Director Daniel.
I have
you something
nothing.
new? Vice President LaHue.
Well, I'll just mention that today when we were on site at the Monterey Well with Congressman Panetta and one of his staff, when we were leaving, we talked to a neighbor across the street who has a daycare and a really cute little puppy. But she had said she, has her kids out in the yard, in the backyard, and hadn't heard anything with the well drilling, hadn't bothered them. They've been sleeping through the night. And the coolest thing was, this is a kudos to public outreach. We asked her if she knew what the well was for, and she knew right away, like that it was a recharge well and that there's one at Twin Lakes. And so anyway, it was just kind of neat to have just run across somebody and then have a lot of positive feedback, in addition to positive feedback from Congressman Panetta. So it was great.
That is great. So let's move. Director Jaffe, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Do you have something to share in oral communications?
I do not.
Okay. Director Christensen.
I don't have anything to share either.
I don't know where you went. You were on my list and then you dropped off. Okay, well, really neither do I. So you want to try to get
Chai.
Ms. Bryce back on? Did she call in?
It doesn't look like she's called in yet, but maybe we can ask Josh if I can just monitor that and see when she does join and take the oral communications then. I'm not sure how that would work.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. We certainly could do that. It would be up to the board's pleasure. Given the technical difficulties, we can move forward, without providing public comment. But if we'd like to, we certainly can leave this issue open and then come back to it if Ms. Bryce is able to connect.
Okay, great. That sounds like we can keep moving, which is always a good thing. We don't have any reports. So we have administrative business. We have no conditional or unconditional will serves. So the next item is presentation of the Santa Cruz Mid-County Basin Water Year 2020 report. And this is, who's doing the report?
This one off, President Lacer. Thank you.
Oh, it's Ron. That's why I was like, I don't see where it says.
Tonight we have Mr. Tana with us, Cameron Tana of Montgomery and Associates, is hydrologist for the MGA and the district. He is going to give you a very good presentation, kind of telling you what the groundwater sustainability plan is about, that's done for the MGA and given to the state, framing that up just to bring everybody along. I really like the presentation. And then he'll drop the latter third of the presentation into more specifics around Soquel Creek Water District. And, we used to bring all the hydrology stuff to the board, and it's kind of migrated to the MGA. So if you like what you hear tonight, we can make this an annual thing, and maybe at other points along the road as the MGA gets updated, the Soquel Creek Water District Board could receive the same thing. So with that, Cameron, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Ron. So we do have a presentation, and as it comes up, I can share that this is very similar to the presentation my colleague Georgina King gave to the Santa Cruz Mid-County Groundwater Agency MGA board back in March on this annual report prepared for the MGA as part of Groundwater Sustainability Plan implementation. But as Ron mentioned, did add something specific to Soquel Creek Water District operations and evaluation. And then I do highlight a couple of things a little bit differently than what Georgina did back in March. So it's maybe a second go around for some of you, but looking forward to a conversation specific to the district around what used to be considered the state of the basin, which we gave to the district annually. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the annual report, and this is the second annual report for the GSP, as I alluded to, we've done annual reports for the district on groundwater conditions in the basin for many years, but this is the second annual report since the GSP was adopted and submitted to DWR. So it does meet a requirement of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA. What's in the report is specified by the regulations for SGMA. And the idea behind it is to really, if not demonstrate, at least inform the State Department of Water Resources about the basin's GSP implementation and what kind of progress is being made towards achieving groundwater sustainability, or at least where the basin's at with respect to groundwater sustainability. Next slide, please. And so here are examples of the different content that is required for the annual report that is included in this annual report for the Mid-County Basin GSP. They include numbers of maps, including modeled results of the change of groundwater and storage by aquifer, distribution of groundwater extraction, contour maps of groundwater levels, charts of water budget. The requirement is change of groundwater and storage, but we provide the full modeled water budget over time. And then observed hydrographs and chemographs of chloride concentrations, which we'll get into a little bit more later. Other requirements include what kind of surface water supply is used in the basin, as well as estimates of total water use. So the board memo includes a link to the report, and you can see all of the information that we provided in that annual report. Next slide, please. So the GSP regulations allow for adaptive management, and that's something the MGA is definitely adopted as an approach to managing the basin. The GSP itself is not at all meant to be a final document, in that it would never be changed, that it recognizes that conditions change and approaches may need to be changed. And so that is the approach the MGA has taken. And what the annual report does, as well as the 5-year update that'll be due in 2025 for the first one, was really give the MGA a chance to tell DWR how they're implementing the GSP, but also how maybe they're changing from what is said in the GSP and how management in basin. But with the idea of the GSP setting the criteria for what is considered sustainable. Next slide, please. So that is one of the main parts of the GSP, is to define what is sustainable, and it is defined based off of 6 different sustainability indicators in SGMA. One of them, land subsidence, doesn't apply to the basin, but the other 5 do. And there are 3 different metrics used to look at the indicators. They include groundwater levels, volume of groundwater extracted, and concentrations. You'll notice that seawater intrusion uses 2 of the metrics, both groundwater level proxies and chloride concentrations. And that is consistent with the fact that the basin is in critical overdraft because of seawater intrusion. So there are more metrics for seawater intrusion and figuring out how the basin is doing in recovering and eliminating overdraft and preventing long-term seawater intrusion. Next slide, please. So this is kind of just a quick overview of how sustainable management criteria are used over time. And there are a number of criteria, including minimum thresholds. And when you look at groundwater levels below that minimum thresholds are considered undesirable results. But you only need to avoid undesirable results after 2040. If you have undesirable results after 2040, then there is the possibility of the state coming in and taking over management of the basin. So those kind of the standard, that the regulatory standard that you do not want to have exceedances of. Now, there is a measurable objective, which is a more aspirational goal, and it's also supposed to provide some operational flexibility above the minimum threshold, so you reduce the risk of actually falling to and below the minimum threshold. And that is the goal also to be achieved by 2040. And it's really the plan, the projects of the plan are meant to try to achieve that so that you don't have undesirable results. You have kind of room for error there. And then there are interim milestones, which are supposed to track progress every 5 years in getting the basin sustainability and to that measurable objective. And then after 2040, your plan needs to have a plan for maintaining sustainability for another 30 years. So it's a kind of a 50-year plan, the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, and this is the second year of it. Thank you. Next, please. And so we have 2 slides about the main takeaways from this annual report. One was that water year 2020 was quite dry. It was about 40% of long-term average precipitation. But even though it was dry, there was improvement in the conditions of the basin with respect to coastal groundwater elevations needed to prevent seawater intrusion. Those elevations did increase because over the last several years, groundwater pumping has been at a historic low, and efforts such as the district's well master plan to redistribute pumping away from the coast has helped raise coastal groundwater elevations and hold off seawater intrusion to some degree. However, as we'll see in the next slide, please. As we look at the seawater intrusion sustainability indicator and first look at groundwater elevations against those criteria, there are a number of locations where groundwater levels, as measured by a 5-year average to make sure that long-term conditions are preventing seawater intrusion, are still below the minimum threshold. So that would mean there are undesirable results at 3 of the locations shown here. With the hydrographs, groundwater level charts shown here, Soquel Point in the city of Santa Cruz area, SC9 and SCA8, but also at the 3 locations of the red dots. That would be SC5, SC8, and SCA3. So there are 5 locations within the district with undesirable results, groundwater levels too low to prevent seawater intrusion long term. So the plan the goal of the plan is to raise groundwater levels to those criteria, to meet those criteria and prevent seawater intrusion. Next slide, please. The more direct measurement of seawater intrusion are salt concentrations, the salty water coming in, and that's specifically the constituent of salt chlorides. And in the last year, there have been increases of chloride concentrations in several areas, most notably in the seascape area at the SCA2 monitoring well and the SCA5 monitoring well, where concentrations have not only increased, but increased above the minimum threshold that would indicate undesirable results. So we actually do have undesirable results at these 2 locations for rising chloride concentrations. And that also in the GSP, there is also, even though the GSP is only required by SGMA to achieve sustainability and not have undesirable results by 2040, the GSP has an additional measure to have early management action so that there is action immediately when there's an indication of trends towards undesirable results. And these rising groundwater concentrations do trigger such an early management action. And what the GSP talks about is reducing nearby municipal pumping, which we'll go into a little bit more in the next slide. So the next slide, this slide is a new slide from what was presented in March. It's more specific to district operations because this early management action that is recommended in the GSP to deal with rising chloride concentrations above the measurable objective is to reduce municipal pumping. And this area is the municipal pumper in this area is Soquel Creek Water District. Do want to reemphasize that kind of these actions are not required by SGMA, and the triggers are really meant to be preemptive. It's supposed to make sure that undesirable results are prevented. In this case, undesirable results are already occurring, but the early management actions should apply. And it is to reduce nearby municipal pumping, but for district operations, it's important to recognize that the nearest municipal well, the Seascape well, to where we're seeing these higher concentrations, is actually pumping very low in recent years. It's less than 50 acre-feet per year. So there's not much to reduce at this specific well. There's more pumping at the next nearest well, San Andreas, marked in blue and on the chart with the amount of pumping. Seascape is this little bit of green on the top. And so there is an opportunity to test potentially lowering pumping at San Andreas and redistributing it elsewhere to see if that helps. But the district staff recognize that they're not the only pumper in the area. There are non-municipal pumpers, institutional pumping, agricultural pumping in this area. And the GSP does, although it recommends reducing nearby municipal pumping, it does allow for the MGA and member agencies to investigate causes that aren't municipal pumping. And so the district staff does plan to work with the MGA to evaluate what might be causing these increasing concentrations in this area. Next slide, please.
Cameron, I was just looking at, there is like an irrigation well for the Seascape Greens area, just right close to the Seascape well in that CA5 monitoring well. So I assume they're planning to communicate either through the MGA or the district with that people that run that well.
Yeah, we haven't developed exactly the next steps on how to approach it. There is that pumper which is classified as institutional in the GSP, as well as the possibility that there might be some new ag wells in the area. So communicating with the county about what well drilling reports have been filed recently, just to get an idea of what has changed as far as pumping in that area, and just taking a closer look.
Does the MGA get access to the pumping records for these various big wells?
They do. I don't think they do yet. What they do have sort of a plan to start gathering that information and requiring that information to be submitted for wells of a certain size, and that is kind of a new an effort that is just being started by the MGA.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can weigh in on that a bit. There was a grant to get a consultant to help with planning that out, and that's a consultant's been identified and in the process of getting a contract.
Great, thank you. And then this is the final slide, and if we can just get back to that slide, thank you. It does kind of summarize where the basin's at related to this groundwater and storage indicator, where the criteria are really based off of the amount of pumping or net pumping in the basin, and is pumping in these different aquifer groups exceeding the sustainable yield. And in 2 of the aquifer groups, they are exceeding the sustainable yield, which is the estimate of what it'll take to make the basin sustainable. In other words, prevent seawater intrusion over the long term primarily. And so the basin needs to raise groundwater levels more to do that, and that will require reducing the net pumping. And that could be reducing pumping, or it could be adding recharge. So projects included in the GSP to do that include projects to add manage recharge, like Pure Water Soquel, like the City of Santa Cruz's aquifer storage and recovery project, a project that does water transfers and then the recharges to reduce pumping, and then distributed stormwater managed aquifer recharges to add some managed recharge. So the annual report does provide an update to DWR and the public about what the status of these different projects are, and that they continue to move forward to achieve sustainability for the basin. And so I think that is it, and welcome any questions or comments.
Do you want to go around through each person, Rochelle? Or?
I suppose I could do that. I wasn't sure if you guys like that. So do we have any members of the public that wanted to speak on this?
Not on this item.
Okay, great. Okay, then let's start with Director Daniels.
I had no questions.
Okay, Vice President LaHue.
Yeah, I just have a question about the chloride concentrations, like for undesirable results for the minimum threshold. I guess they're the same criteria, they're just, are they different levels? So for minimum threshold for the long-term one, it has to be above that minimum threshold for 2 or more of the last 4 consecutive quarterly samples. And then the same thing's true, it has to be exceed, in this case, the measurable objectives for 2 of 4 quarterly samples. Are those different chloride levels?
Yes, so the measurable objective is generally is a lower concentration than the minimum threshold. And so it is different at each well if the well is intruded already.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so it depends on where they are.
Those are generally higher concentrations, and they're based off of recent concentrations. So they're meant to indicate is seawater intrusion advancing farther than we've observed it recently. And so if those concentrations exceed those levels, it does indicate that the seawater intrusion is advancing beyond where it's been recently, and that the NGA would be significant and unreasonable seawater intrusion.
Okay, thanks.
All right, the next person would be Director Jaffe.
Yeah, it was a good presentation, Cameron. Second time seeing it, it's very clear. So no questions.
Okay, Director Christensen.
Yeah, I just had a question. I thought it was a very good presentation too. And I actually saw Georgina's presentation. I didn't see that one slide, but I was wondering, just to go back, are there any indicators of storage capacity reduction inland, farther inland, or is it just still limited to just saltwater indicators of,
Mhm.
is that?
Yeah, so the annual report does cover chronic depletion of groundwater levels, and there are, in the GSP does criteria for groundwater levels farther inland that would indicate reduction in well supply for inland puppers. And there are no undesirable results for that. We do not see trends that are lowering groundwater levels. Generally, those minimum thresholds were set so that groundwater levels do not lower over the long term. There is locations, just depending on where and the pumping is occurring, locations where you have reduction of groundwater and storage, and other locations where you have increases of groundwater and storage, and that is shown in the maps of modeled results in the annual report. But overall, there are not undesirable results for those groundwater levels inland.
Yeah, that was it's always nice to keep, because I talked to someone during the course of the generation of the plan. I remember one of the consultants was coming in and saying, well, this is just the starting level is at 2013, yet we did have some indications of groundwater depletion in the 80s. And so I was just wondering, well, did those get worse, or did, seem like I was worried that 2013 wasn't a good starting place for our district.
Yeah, and this is one of the things about Sigma, is it did define a specific year, and I think it was 2015, but people have looked at that's generally time period as oh, that's the baseline, but every GSA for every basin can choose what they want to use as their standard. That's just sort of the minimum that can be set, or just the lowest. Lowest is probably not the right word, but just a standard that you have to at least meet. But basins, and the Mid-County Basin has definitely done more than that, and said we want to look at what makes sense for us, and we want to be more protective than that. So
it appears so. It's a really good job. It's been very thorough. But it's nice to check, especially since we're still don't have our water project online to help address the seawater intrusion yet. So yeah, but good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think this was very thorough. This is easy to follow too. There's a lot of little graphs. You have to look closely. You could see me going like this in the picture, but my biggest concern is the seawater intrusion, because we could have levels, but you still have seawater intrusion. So I'm glad that you're looking at both.
Yeah, and this is where adaptive management is important, because if you just looked at the groundwater levels, you would say this area is doing okay, but we're seeing these rising concentrations. So it may mean we got to look at those levels again. What is really necessary to prevent seawater intrusion, and that's all going to be part of GSP implementation, and needs to be looked at least by the time of the 5-year update, if not earlier.
And then by the time of the 5-year update, we'll have our project going so we can see if what the impacts are.
Yes.
From that standpoint. So it's perfect. Okay, so do we have any other items? What are our choices on the motion?
This was
just informational.
Okay.
But
that's what I thought.
It sounds like the board enjoyed this, so we'll put it on the docket to make it an annual event
every year.
If you like. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to 7.3, which is the proposed groundwater based. Wait, let me see. I'm in the
triggers.
right place, right? It seems like a similar topic. Shortage consists.
I'll go ahead and
Thank you for not making me say it all.
Thank you. It is very related to the last item that Cameron presented, and thanks, Cameron, for that great segue into this next item. At the last board meeting, staff presented a draft water shortage contingency plan for the 2020 urban water management plan that included a specific groundwater-based trigger condition to evaluate whether a shortage stage exists, and we need to declare curtailment and actions that go along with that. The trigger conditions that were presented are tied to the MTA, the DSP. They're based on those undesirable results and the early management actions that you just heard about. And they specifically apply to the pre-pure water Soquel period, recognizing that once that project comes online, we are going to have to basically update the water shortage contingency plan. So with that in mind, the trigger conditions were to be used in addition to the other trigger conditions, rainfall and recharge, as well as any reductions in production capacity. We previously brought that component to the board in March. Cameron gave a presentation on that. And then at the last board meeting, there were some questions that I really wasn't able to answer. And so the board asked that we bring Cameron back to talk about those trigger conditions a little bit more and whether they're accurately or adequately, I guess, responsive enough to conditions in the basin and protective of, preventing further seawater intrusion. So we have Cameron here tonight. I would like to ask or just point out that the water shortage contingency plan and the urban plan are both due to the Department of Water Resources on July 1st. We are planning a public hearing at the second board meeting in May to consider, comments and input on the draft of both of the urban plans and the water shortage contingency plan. So if the board does wish to change the groundwater-based triggers, we really need to get some direction on that tonight if we are going to meet the regulatory deadline for those documents. I guess the benefit or the driver for meeting that requirement as opposed to asking for an extension or pushing it off is that eligibility for grants is tied to meeting that submittal date. So just wanted to point that out. And with that, I'll turn it over to Cameron. Thank you, Cameron.
Thank you, Shelley. And I'm again basically recycling a presentation that's been given before. At least this time I gave the previous one. This is basically the same slides I gave in March, but I've cut out some of them, so it is shorter to try to just review what we proposed before and really get to any questions you may have and see if we can get the direction that Shelley described we need. Next slide, please. So these are the proposed groundwater condition triggers. There are basically two categories for these triggers. There are the undesirable results for seawater intrusion occurring. And this is using this is set up to be consistent with how the board has considered groundwater emergency declaration for the water shortage contingency plan and drought and curtailment. And the district has been in stage 3 because there are undesirable results for seawater intrusion occurring, indicating critical overdraft as the basis for the groundwater emergency. So that we built off of that and said, if there are undesirable results, it should be stage 3. If there are more undesirable results than we've been observing recently, it should be more than stage 3, and then we increased it from there. Then we also added primarily to say, well, what happens if there aren't any undesirable results and what conditions would you have stage 1 or 2. And there we do it based off of early management action triggers that they're to prevent future undesirable results. What actions could you take? What kind of tools could the district have to address any issues before undesirable results occur? And so all of this is consistent with the GSP, as both undesirable results and early management action triggers are just defined in the GSP as I described earlier tonight. Next slide, please. So, as we discussed in the last presentation, there continue to be undesirable results for seawater intrusion. As I pointed out on the maps, there are currently undesirable results at 7 monitoring well locations. And this is less than it has been previously, but enough to be consistent with basin that's in critical overdraft because of seawater intrusion, and consistent with declaring stage 3 based off of groundwater emergency. So that's how we have set up to be consistent with that. If you look in the past, there actually have been a couple of times where our proposal would have led to stage 4. That was before a groundwater emergency was declared. But that number 10 of stage 4 is higher than the number of wells where we have groundwater level proxies indicating undesirable results. So stage 4 was meant to be, you'd have to have at least some concentrations that are too high as well for it to go up to stage 4. So that's how we set up that stage and the 10 threshold, the 10 well location threshold for that. And it has occurred a couple times in the past. Next slide, please. So we also have these criteria for early management action triggers. As mentioned before, there are triggers related to chloride concentrations. Did want to review the early management action triggers for groundwater levels, which we didn't get into before. And again, this is not required for the GSP, but the idea was, because undesirable results are based off of long-term conditions, a 5-year average of groundwater levels to prevent seawater intrusion over the long term, the GSP also includes these short-term triggers to make sure any short-term issues are addressed before it becomes a long-term issue and becomes truly undesirable results. So based off of a 30-day average, below these trigger levels of 2 feet for most of the basin, but 1 feet in part of the aromas area, that leads to a preemptive early management action. So at these conditions, you don't have undesirable results yet. You don't have seawater intrusion. You don't have the long-term condition that would lead to seawater intrusion, but it is sort of a warning signal to do something. And the first action is pumping redistribution. But what we are adding here is a tool for the district to potentially reduce pumping, to help reduce pumping where you're seeing these issues. And so you're just increasing the stage. If you're seeing it at more places, then it becomes harder to redistribute pumping to lower pumping where you're seeing these issues. So where you see it at more locations, you want the ability to reduce pumping overall. And so we just ramp up the number of wells with the stage level for this. And so that's the idea behind that, and we do something similar and we include chloride concentrations in the evaluation as well. Next slide, please. So back to the proposal. We do have these two categories for this proposals, and basically if you're seeing it at more locations, it is a more severe shorter stage. And I know there were questions about it last time, and be willing to try to answer any of those or any other ones now and see what kind of direction you have for us.
I have a question.
I muted myself twice. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Director Daniels.
So in looking at your map back there, it looked like 16 of the RMPs were in the district's area, and 8 of them were in the city's area. Now, this is not something we're doing for the agencies, something we're doing for the district.
Right.
And in particular, if there are problems in the district, in the city's area, there's no way we can reduce pumping in the city's area. That's strictly something that the city has control over. We have no control over it. So I think that we should only include those RMPs that are within our control, which is, inside the district area, those 16. And if we do that, there's no way we can get to 20 because we only have 16 spots in our area where that could even happen. In fact, if we got to 15, that would be amazing because that's all but one of the ones that are in the district's area. Because, certainly the agency would like to do something that includes the entire basin, but we can and should only do things that should be in our control, that we have any possibility of changing. And saying that, there's another problem I see here. There are 2 of them down here at the very far right, SEA3 and Altivo. And both of those, we have no pumping wells there. So there's no way that we can fix problems that occur there. They're in the district, but we can't reduce pumping there because pumping in that La Selva area is 0. And you can't reduce from 0. So those are the issues that I see.
So the proposal is designed just to include Soquel Creek Water District RMPs. We might have to go back and check the count, but I think I had counted 21, and so that it was possible to have 20 RMPs with either undesirable results or early management action triggers, but certainly would want it to be possible. But the idea was definitely only to use district RMPs. But yes, we are including those wells in the La Selva area in this proposal. So then the point is fair in that you can't, the first early management action for pumping reduction in nearest wells is not possible in that area. And so that's where you go to the MGA and say, well, you got to figure something else for that area. And it's not something the district can handle unilaterally.
Well, I'm not sure what the MGA can do about that, because I mean, if we don't have pumping down in the La Selva area, certainly the agency doesn't have pumping in the La Selva area. So that is a problem area for the whole scheme that we have, is that if there are problems down there, there's no way for us to reduce pumping. There may be some private pumping in there, but that would, and I don't imagine there's any huge private pumping in that area. There's some ag wells there in the separation between La Selva and Seascape area, but
well, I thought it was relevant to put those in there because of the general flow of the water. That's how that place doesn't have seawater intrusion, is it the freshwater flow through the aquifer in that general direction. And I thought, was my impression, you please correct me if I'm wrong, but theoretically the injection wells with freshwater, the Pure Water Soquel project, I thought was going to be examined to see whether it had an impact in that area.
So, so the Pure Water Soquel is going to inject or recharge the Prism formation more to the west of that area. Now, Pure Water Soquel is also designed to improve conditions in the southeastern area where it doesn't directly recharge, to kind of consider the Aromas area, but pumping is also from the shallowest unit from the Prism formation, the F unit. So that is that seascape area as well. But that's all designed on the ability to reduce pumping in that area. And as Director Daniels points out, in the very southeastern portion of the district, the LaSalle area, the district no longer pumps in that area. So the ability of Pure Water Soquel to support reductions of that pumping in that specific area is not possible. In kind of the broader area, service area 3, it is possible. So that is kind of just the difference there, just one specific area where the district no longer pumps. So the ability of Pure Water Soquel to help that area is.
I also noticed in a recent status report that some of the levels in that area were getting worse over time. So
Yes.
it's not bad yet, but you know, that points up the problem that if things start going really bad, there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, and that's where the MGA does have powers from Sigma to do more. But certainly that is kind of more of a last resort, but that is more within the jurisdiction of the MGA under Sigma.
Okay, Vice President LaHue, did you have anything to? Okay, it looks like you said no and you're muted. But I'm gonna move on.
No, you're correct. I said no, thank you.
Director Jaffe. You're mute. Okay, good.
I'm unmuted now. Yeah, so in the board packet, it does only list 16 representative monitoring points. So that's something to check, because we do want to be able to get to supercritical. And it was very helpful seeing the past conditions, although I did have a brief question about that, just on the figure 2 from the board packet, and you showed it, that shows the number of RMPs with undesirable results for seawater intrusion. So yeah, that one there. What is the both category? I didn't quite get that. There's groundwater elevations only and chloride concentrations only.
Chloride, we're both chloride and.
Yeah, so for a single RMP, it had undesirable results for both.
So you don't count that double, you just count.
You don't count that double.
Gotcha.
Right.
And so I can see from this figure that there were years that we basically would have been in stage 4 as proposed. And so this was helpful to see this, and I do get the nexus on how we're now at stage 3, and you want to have a consistency between, you know, what this methodology would indicate the stages are and what we're actually doing. Although it's only one criteria for determining the shortest stage. So I would just ask that, you know, you look at whether or not, if we only have 15 RMPs, perhaps adjusting when you go into the different RM, you know, into severe and critical and supercritical.
Yeah, I think we definitely want it to be something that is possible given the current setup.
Cameron, would it help to refer to page 55 of the packet, which is the technical memorandum, and it's table 3, the early management action triggers, and what representative monitoring points look at
Yeah,
them.
I think, what is table 2? And
Yeah, page 51.
yeah, I think there's actually, the questions are more about the undesirable results.
Okay.
Okay, Director Christensen, do you have any comments or questions?
I had that one, and that answered my question. But I saw the point of including all of the wells that are, because they are part of our basin, and I'm assuming that we would be getting regular updates, especially now as we move into a drought situation again, on the status of those monitoring wells in the Santa Cruz city side of our district, and that is why those wells are included, because it gives you a more complete picture of the status of the basin. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the annual report that I presented earlier does cover the RMPs that are outside the district, including in the city. So that does cover that. These specific triggers, consistent with what Director Daniels was suggesting, is only based off of district RMPs. But that update is an annual report. We also continue to, and I think staff is trying to figure out how to adjust this. Now that we have a GSP, but we continue to meet with city staff and review data on an annual basis with respect to the cooperative groundwater management agreement, which is still in place between the city and the district. And so that kind of looks more specifically at conditions in the shared area between the city and the district. And so that is something that we do prepare on an annual basis and go over with staff. If that is something that, kind of looking at that detail at the board level, I think that's something that we could do.
Well, it's just the question of whether it's relevant for setting an emergency stage for us. And it's, at first I really thought that we should be relying on our own district wells. But on the other hand, if there are these other wells, just for consistency, it might start to get confusing to people if we had two different sets of criteria for this. So it was just
yeah, no, I mean, I don't know specifically with the city of Santa Cruz. I mean, what their plan, I'm sure, is very different from your plan in that they rely so much more on surface water. So a lot of their plan is really related on how much surface water supply is available. This is lecture on my part, but my guess is that that's what it is. And so and since your supply is groundwater, it's appropriate to have more groundwater conditions triggers, but also I think appropriate to be focused on conditions within your area that you can affect.
I know that's a really reasonable suggestion. That's a reasonable suggestion too. So
I think there also, as we get back to the count of 16 versus something greater than 20, I think the 16 might come from the number of monitoring wells that are RMPs, but we do use these production wells at the bottom of this table as representative monitoring points for chloride concentrations. And so if they are,
I'm having trouble.
Cameron, your mic is acting weird.
Your audio's really gone bad.
And I think Rebecca.
is muted.
Oh, it's still bad.
Is it still bad? I can call it.
Darth Vader.
Yeah, something strange happened out of nowhere.
Oh, I will call in.
Gotta
Maybe
be
turn
good,
the
Cameron.
camera off and see if that helps.
Oh yeah, turn off the camera.
Does that help?
No.
Okay. I will call in. You sound great to me, so I will try to do my
And
phone.
you've got that Darth Vader thing going there. So, is there any discussion? I mean, I guess what we're supposed to be doing is giving guidance. There's no, I don't think there's any kind of motion.
No, I mean, if we did want to make changes, we would need to make a motion, but if we're okay with the triggers as they are, I don't think we need to.
I guess the main question is whether to make sure that to tie the triggers that the monitoring wells into the triggers that we can actually control. As
I mean, I think that's a management action we can deal with later. We probably don't need to deal with it before this particular, you know, the whole urban water management plan gets published with the water shortage contingency plan. Seems like that'd be pretty quick to work on something like that.
yeah, well, I agree with that. But does anybody else have any other comments on that?
President Lather, it looks like you're speaking, but we can't hear you.
I'm just as bad as everybody else. I'm just sitting here talking. I guess we could take no action and move on to the next item if that's the case. And it looks like it is.
Yeah.
And the next item is the LAFCO annexation and service boundary expansion. And that will be presented by Taj Dufour. Were there any public comments? I guess that's after the presentation. Sorry about that, Taj. And I do see that Joe Serrano is here. So
yeah, Mr. Serrano is the executive director for LAFCO. And I do think we have some members of the public that might also be on the line. And so we will open that up after I give a little overview for you, as well as their benefit. Thank you for this opportunity to share. It's not every day that we bring a LAFCO item to you. I know some of you are on the LAFCO board. So you see this maybe from other agencies. And if you haven't spent much time looking at our actual boundary, it's not an inclusive boundary. It has islands in it. It has gaps in it. It has arms that reach out into areas of the district. And in an area down in La Selva Beach near the Canyon del Sol tank, we have several parcels, and I will direct your attention to attachment 1. And if you go to the second page of that attachment, several of the parcels in green are outside our formal district boundary, but they're customers of ours. And that includes the state parks, and it includes several residential lots, and those are listed in green there. The blue solid line is our formal boundary. And we did have an application, and in the past, you know, when some of these parcels came to us wanting to be served, they were served through what was called an extraterritorial service agreement. And Mr. Serrano was contacted, and he said, you know, we don't do those anymore. And if we did, they're really intended to be temporary. with the assumption that, you know, a formal application for a boundary adjustment would follow. And so here we are, we have an applicant that is asking to be served by the district due to saltwater contamination. And so if we're going to go through those motions, we wanted to meet with LAFCO and talk about what would be a orderly expansion of the district boundary that made sense. In prior years, I had personally had conversations with Renaissance High School, and they're shown on the northern side of San Andreas Road, the smaller parcel in orange. And next to that is the Campground of America, KOA. I will be honest, I haven't had a chance to talk to them about this or any future service needs, but they both are on existing wells. A lot of these parcels in orange, actually all of them are on existing wells. But the reason I was talking to Renaissance High School is they were concerned about potential issues with chromium-6 as well as potential seawater intrusion. So tonight we wanted to just open an informational discussion with you and learn what you would like us to present. The first step in this process is to bring a resolution to the board, which we're not doing tonight. We would bring a resolution that would ask LAFCO to initiate the proceedings. And there's an attachment listed in the memo that, you know, Mr. Serrano put together for us that shows the schedule of events that would happen. But really, kind of the first step is to decide, well, where would we, if we were going to do this, where would we draw the line? And bear in mind, the goal here is to make it a logical line, okay, and not have more islands and things like that. I do want to reiterate that just because we expand our boundary does not force these existing parcels to be hooked up to the district. Mr. Nelson and Mr. Serrano can hopefully clarify that if I missed that. But it would open an opportunity for those unserved parcels to apply to the board of directors for a will serve if in the future they wanted to be hooked up. And of course, the existing policies would apply to those parcels. We tried to present a few options. The first option is kind of all-inclusive, or what we think would be a logical boundary. There's another option that would cut out Renaissance High School and KOA. You know, since preparing this memo, I actually got contacted by two representatives of Renaissance, and they actually are perhaps going to speak tonight that say, no, please keep us in the boundary. They don't want to lose the opportunity to be considered to be hooked up if they're unable to meet their water quality needs. The benefit here is that we have a water main that's really not far. It runs down San Andreas Road and down Sand Dollar. So that makes it relatively convenient to be served, to serve some of these parcels. I will end it there and open it up for conversation. Tom?
I just wanted to add one thing is when somebody has extraterritorial service, I'm pretty sure that while they get water from us, they are still unable to vote.
That is correct.
Okay. So by having them within the district, they have the right to vote in addition to getting water service.
Right. And that's another, reason to, I'm sure that's another reason LAFCO, proposes that condition that no, they're really supposed to be temporary. At some point in the near future, you should include them so they are able to vote because they are customers of our district.
Okay, so let's first go to public comment, up to 2 minutes each. Yeah, and then I can comment on how I see it too. Who is first?
Chris Webb, I need to promote to panelist. I just got a note saying because he's using an older version of Zoom. So I'm going to do that. And Mr. Webb.
Hi, yes, I am Chris Webb. I'm a teacher at Renaissance High School. I've been there since 2015. I've been there while we've had Chromium-6 issues come up, and some of this has happened like at the state level where they adjusted things, came in with bottled water for us. Then they changed the MCL, but nothing really changed. So some of the public trust was kind of lost. And we're basically left at where the water that we have 2 RO drinking fountains that were installed. And students can use like reusable bottles, but because of COVID, they can't take the bottles back and forth. So now people are drinking out of disposable bottles. This would be so huge for us. I need this so that I can pressure the district to deliver us a long-term solution where we can have clean water that we can trust coming from our actual faucets. So right now, the only like trustworthy water is 2 RO stations. And then those are really only good if you have your own bottles, and most students don't, even though we just had donations. Also, I feel that adding Renaissance would lend itself to this board's sustainability goals. So I feel like it kind of works for you guys, and it works for everyone in the community, and it would be good for Renaissance. And I think it's perfect time to do in light of some of the federal plans, some of their infrastructure plans. I want my board at PVSD to be able to rely on those federal monies and connect to Soquel Water District. I have the permission. Basically, everything right now could line up perfectly with this addition. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So who is the next person?
That was our only request for this item.
Oh.
However, I do believe that we have a couple people, including Joe Serrano, that may speak on this item as well.
Correct. Yeah, the way I see, and of course I have my own opinion, and I get to speak first if I want, right? Is that LAFCO annexation provides the opportunity. It's not forcing anybody to do that, but when they have the emergency, they don't have to go through all the steps and the cost associated. This is cost effective for everyone. And it's just an opportunity that is there if you need it. And so, you know, I'm all for this, but let me go in the right order, not just jump in. Okay, Director Daniels, do you have anything to say?
Oh yeah, I got a lot of things to say. I think, well, I'm completely against this notion. Look how much area we're talking about here. How many acres? Hundreds of acres, maybe 1,000. And I would imagine real estate developers are salivating at the notion of getting their hands on this area with all the water they need. So the water problem just goes away because they just hook up to us. And we were just talking about La Selva and what the problem is there, that you know, if they start having more saltwater intrusion, we don't have any wells there to stop using. But look how much area we're adding to that. If there's saltwater intrusion any place in this area, we would have no wells here, because it would be stupid for us to put wells in this area, because as was mentioned, there's chrome here. And a well we put there costs several $1 million, but if we have to put a chrome treatment plant there, we're talking about, you know, 10 or 100 or I don't know, a huge cost to put in a treatment plant and a well and all that stuff. And that, I think that's just crazy. I mean, we are basically, yes, I see the problem these people have, and they would like a white knight to run in with huge amounts of money and solve their problem so that they wouldn't have anything. but I think that is a disservice to our current customers to basically, put us in the place that anyone in that area can come to us, just like anyone in our current area, and ask to be hooked up. And we've got a process, and we basically hand out will serve letters right now. And I think this is just wrong. So I'm against it.
Thank you, Director Daniels. I guess I need some clarification. It's my understanding that most of these areas, except for a few, are being served already. And maybe Joe or Taj, you can let us know how many acres this would add to our district.
It's
There's
about
also-
140 acres.
And then there's also land use requirements. I know that LAFCO does not encourage the use of ag land for future development. That's not your job. That's not your goal, right? Maybe Joe, you could explain that to us.
Chair Lather, good evening, board members. Again, my name is Joe Serrano, the Executive Officer for LAFCO. Chair Lather, you raised a couple good points, and Taj, you just mentioned it. A lot of these parcels in question, which total around 140 acres, are already being served by the district. So annexation would just reflect what the district is already doing, which is providing water, but it would allow those landowners to vote as part of the election process, or even run for a board seat if they are annexed into the area. The question about land use, you're absolutely right. These areas are not in a city, it's an unincorporated county. So the county, in essence, determines the land use designation for these areas. And some of them are designated as agriculture, meaning that some of these parcels are restricted from being built for anything else other than farmland use. So it really depends on the county on how they want to determine the land use for these areas. And again, something that Board Member Daniels mentioned, it is up to the district whether or not to approve a request to connect to the district. So if you annex these parcels and they're not receiving water, they still need to receive approval from the district to connect and get service provisions from Soquel Water District. Annexation of this area would just allow these parcels that are not hooked up the opportunity to go straight to the district rather than going through the LAFCO process on a case-by-case basis. You're really being more efficient in the governance process by annexing this area as a whole rather piecemeal approach. And hope that answers your questions, but I'm here to answer any additional questions. That's my purpose here tonight.
Another point about this entire area is not in our basin. This entire area is controlled by PVWMA. So we would not be, doing what our current agency does. We would have to be doing what PVWMA wants us to do. And I think that's just a bad thing to get into.
Thank you, Director Daniels. That's very interesting. How about Vice President LaHue? It's your turn.
Well, I think having served on LAFCO, I have a prejudice towards just efficiently organizing districts and city boundaries. And I also, like was mentioned, a lot of these parcels are already served, and they also, other parcels could request service from the district. So it really doesn't change whether we decide to provide water or not to a request. It just changes the process that they have to go through and whether they're represented by being able to vote in the district as well. So it's a more efficient process. It's a more logical boundary. And we still make the decision of, whether we provide water to any additional parcels or not. The other thing is that if they are on a well, they're close to the coast. And I realize that, that doesn't, directly affect seawater intrusion in some of our wells, but I still think, if we can provide, redistribute water and provide it from more inland wells or wells that within a couple of years will be protected by Pure Water Soquel, instead of having them pump right by the coast, I think that's still a valuable thing.
Thank you. Director Jaffe? Oh, you're muted if you're speaking.
Yeah. Very charged issues here on whether or not annexation will result in service. And what I'm hearing is it doesn't necessarily do so, but that it would make the process more streamlined if we decide that we do have enough water to serve these areas. I also, I mean, I think this is the future of that's going to be coming our way as hopefully not, but I do think a lot of these coastal areas are going to start getting salt water into their wells. And so although it's not our responsibility to serve them, if our Pure Water Soquel project is able to produce enough water to make our basin sustainable, and at the same time to serve people whose wells are intruded by seawater, I'd like to see that happen in the future. I also wanted to point out that this is not a unique problem to this area. Going back to the original, the overview map, there's other areas that are outside the district, and yet where we're serving, but they're outside the district boundaries. So I'd like to see us clean those up as well.
Thank you, Director Jaffe. Yeah, this is one of the things, though, is that we're talking about annexing, but there's going to have to be environmental review. There's going to have to be a lot of other items completed in order to show that annexation is not going to harm the environment. So yeah, we'll have more information later once those studies are completed. Taj, how do we, here I'm the president, how do we do this? Do we make the connection fee reflect the extra amount we have to spend on these parcels? Or I know I'm more from a sewer district, so I'm just trying to figure out how we justify having to pay for an environmental report.
Well, at this stage, one of the applicant that asked us about this is willing to cover the costs. And BBK has prepared a cost reimbursement agreement that we would bring to the board, at the next stage, if that's the will of the board tonight. There are survey costs, and it's my understanding that those, the costs for the LAFCO annexation process has been considered by the applicant, and he's willing to cover that. I will want to remind the board that there is an incentive that our district put together to encourage people to come off of wells, especially in areas of overdraft. And so the connection fees are reduced because of that, because we want to encourage coming off, especially in an area like this, where we don't want to encourage additional groundwater extraction. But so the costs at this stage are going to be covered, and we wouldn't have to pass them on to any of the existing customers or these future customers. So I do want to say that when you looked at the budget earlier tonight, you saw that $7,000 amount included. That was prior to the applicant indicating that he would cover those costs, and that's only the application cost that Mr. Serrano indicated would be a deposit, but there are additional costs, and so if the reimbursement agreement gets presented, then we wouldn't use the money that was shown in the budget.
Is this person willing to pay for just hooking up his property, or is he willing to pay for hooking up all the property in this 160 acres that you mentioned?
He wouldn't be responsible for paying for hookups. He would be responsible for the annexation boundary adjustment and the sphere of influence adjustment, but not hooking people up. No.
There's one thing we've always done in the past when we had, like the people down on the sand. It was they had to upscale their system to meet our standards. So they had to replace pipes and valves, and now they'd have to put in our new kind of meters, and they basically would be up to our level before we would hook them up. And I think that's a good thing, rather than having the current customers pay for these other people, which is probably violating Prop 218. They would pay for their own upgrade so that they would be able just to fit right into the system.
I hear what you're saying now, Director Daniels. I misunderstood you. Yeah, in this case, there is no separate system. It would be our distribution system, and if one of these orange parcels wanted to be served, it would be on their responsibility to extend a water main to serve them. And so Renaissance High, for example, or even KOA, they do not front a water main, and they would have to pay for the additional cost to cross under the railroad tracks and come, bring service to themselves. The applicant doesn't need to do that because the parcel in question fronts one of our existing water mains. A lot of these parcels already front an existing water main. I count only about 4 that don't front a water main, but they're very close. Okay, the water main is at, basically it comes up Sand Dollar. So I hear what you're saying, and yeah, normally any applicant that wants to be served would be responsible for bringing our infrastructure near their parcel to front it.
I just want to make sure we hear from Carla before we go too much
Oh,
further.
yeah. Sorry. Well, also, okay, so I lost track where I was. Sorry about that. Director Christensen, do you have something to say? I could see you squirming around there.
Well, I mean, I'm concerned. I've been looking at the map, in addition to the gridded map here. And I see that we already served a substantial part of these parcels, but what do we serve them with? I mean, are there houses there? I mean, what is the zoning status of that? Would we even have enough money were the county to approve another La Selva Beach development? Would we be able to provide water for all that? Because we know very darn well that they do agricultural conversions in zoning. So
yeah, okay, good question. That's why are you able to see the map that's shown now with the aerial photos?
Yeah, that's the one I was looking at in my
okay, good. Several of these are commercial ag. Some of them are rural ag, and some of them are institutional or commercial. Those are the school and the KOA. But the ones that are already served are essentially their residences. They're bluff homes. Or what's happening is we are serving the residents, and they have an existing well that they continue to use for agriculture. Now that that is up to your discretion. And in the past, I will remind the board that in prior will serve considerations, you have put it as a condition of service that all wells get destroyed. And that's of course, that's on our will serve checklist. That is our standard protocol. Now, the condition that is sometimes not able to happen is if there's a shared well and one party wants to be hooked up to the district and one party does not, that one party that applies cannot force the hand of the neighbor that's sharing the well. And in that type of situation, we usually just say you have to sever your connection from the well, and the neighbor can keep the well, and it stays like that. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, but then, so what did Lusella Beach? That is part of the Pajaro. Where does their water come from? Is that from a well, that development, the big housing development?
Which one are you talking about?
The one that's in the middle of all these parcels that we were gonna.
Oh, no, we serve them.
That's Sand Dollar and Canyon del Sol.
Yeah, are you talking about in the middle of the screen here?
Right.
Yeah, they're already served.
They're already served. Okay,
Yeah.
so then we would just be including the whole thing contiguously. So it is still just a question of, well, I guess we just depend on future boards and county planners to be wise about how the hookups would go.
Right. So just so you're clear, down below is the Manresa Uplands Campground. So that's State Park. We actually already serve their bathrooms.
Yeah.
That's why we call them extraterritorial, because they're served, but they're outside our boundary. And then up, the following maps kind of illustrate who's already served. And those are the green parcels, and sorry, inside the blue is also served. So we could have hatched that, but we wanted to be clear who's in and who's out. So really,
so that was a little confusing to me.
Yeah,
I know we serve them, but who are they? Okay, all right.
Yeah. So really what we're talking about is the orange parcels that are currently not served. They're currently, on a private well.
So then when we're talking about that, we're not planning to provide agricultural water in that case.
I don't think anybody could efficiently, cost effectively farm land with our water.
But then let's say Pajaro provides the recycled water for irrigation up there. So then why would they need Soquel Creek water for that, for those agricultural lands?
They probably wouldn't, but they would, they're right now, the application is for one or maybe two homes, I believe.
Okay. Oh, so that's what it is. It's legal to put homes on each one of these large parcels then?
Right.
Oh, okay.
That's my understanding.
Oh, okay.
There's no current proposal to do a large subdivision on the applicant's parcel.
Yeah, because that would be quite a charge to rezone that. Well, okay, thank you. That was my main one of my main concerns is just.
Which one is Pete's parcel?
The long sliver here.
Oh, okay.
All right.
This is just direction to staff. I think it's not like we're deciding on anything, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
clarified a couple things.
I think what we're asking the board is to, direct staff to return, well, one, decide on what area you want to look at, and then we would come back to you at another meeting and ask for consideration of a resolution to take to LAFCO to initiate the proceedings.
I'll make a motion that we we include the areas on the map that you outlined to be included in the LAFCO consideration for annexing.
Okay, I want to be clear.
I
There's
don't think
two
we have
maps.
to have a motion.
So all of the areas that are proposed to be annexed, like, I can't scroll the map, but as much as I try with my finger.
Director LaHue, it's the map that's currently on the screen, which includes the two parcels on the other side of San Andreas Road.
Yeah, so all of those.
Thank you.
So including Renaissance High School and KOA and the other yellow parcels, and the green ones that where the people that already have water but can't vote are.
Okay.
I'll second that one. That's okay. I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Emma?
Roll call, Director Daniels,
Director Daniels, got to turn on your mic.
I vote no.
Vice President LaHue,
Yes.
Director Jaffe,
Yes.
Director Christensen,
Yes.
and President Leather.
Yes.
All right, thank you. We will return probably at the next board meeting for your consideration of the LAFCO resolution and also a reimbursement agreement.
Okay, well, thank you, Taj. So we'll move to the next item, which looks like it may be adjournment.
Well, does Bryce, Bryce, would she still like to?
Oh, that's right. Did she come back? I was looking for her for a while, but
No, she, it doesn't look like she's on the line. I didn't see her join.
Okay.
okay, so if that's the case, then I adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Night all.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.